Yes, it is. And it's 3 in Japan. 3 in the afternoon.
So, welcome to all of you from around the world to this webinar hosted by myself, Mish Middelmann, and my colleague Fuyuo Sato from Japan. Fuyuo?
Hi everyone. First of all, Mish, thank you for having me here at this precious opportunity. And everyone, I'm Fuyuo from Japan. And as you see behind me, I'm in my house surrounded by woods, 120 kilometers away from the center of Tokyo. And I really feel this grow, this planet. And thank you for coming here.
Thank you so much for being with us, and such a privilege to connect across all this distance. And we're all grateful that you survived the typhoon over the weekend. And some of us are not quite so positive about your country succeeding this weekend in the rugby. Some of us want South Africa to win, but may the best team win anyway.
Okay, only the heaven knows.
Indeed. And we're here to really talk about what it is that that attracts people towards the idea of self-managing teams and organizations. And wherever you and your organization are, what's next for you? So we're going to start this off, because we're coming from a relationship base in this call. We're going to start this call off by inviting you to make some relationship with each other, and at the same time to engage with the topic. So really the request is for you to think about either your own organization, if you're coming here as a leader of an organization, as I know many of you are, or if you're coming here as a coach or somebody who serves other organizations. Think of the organization that matters most to you, maybe the client organization that matters most to you. And in just a moment, I'm going to ask you to share with a partner, and we'll break you into groups. Share with a partner if that organization was had its own character or personality. So you might imagine it as a creature or a kind of a person, but the whole organization. Just sort of think about, so what kind of a creature or entity or being is it? And how old is it? And what does it want? And what does it need? And what's next for it? So in just a moment, I'm going to break you into pairs and ask you to share with the person you meet, to greet the person you meet, and just share with them, what is the metaphor for your organization? And what's really next for your organization? We think that will bring the right sort of thoughts and feelings into the field on this call. And if you forgive me, I'm going to click a bit and set up what we call breakout rooms. Welcome back. Good to see you.
So fun.
So good to see people coming back. I hope you had a chance to get into a conversation with your partner from somewhere in the world.
Yes. Karen and I did.
Yay.
And we happen to be living in the same city, so that's good news.
Well, that was interesting, because there were some big transcontinental links, and then there are also some that are in the same city. So that's cool. And people are coming back. It says 5 seconds till the breakout rooms all close. So I guess we're all back. Just wanting to say welcome back to all of you, and maybe just ask what struck you about the conversations you had. Anybody, what struck you about the conversations you just had?
Can I go, Mish? It's Leela.
Please.
For me, it was about being greeted with such warmth and a big smile. So I think that just opened up the conversation, and yeah, appreciated the sharing. Really
Wow.
appreciated how it resonated with the work that I'm doing. So yeah, it really was the energy that we entered into the conversation with that got it happened.
Thank
to,
you.
Yeah, opened up.
That's so helpful. And it's also about shifting the virtual energy in this virtual meeting. Thank you for that, Lila. Anybody else who'd like to share? What struck you about the conversation you just had?
Hi, good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, what struck me was a resonance with where I'm also at in some respects around my partner spoke about an organic garden as a metaphor for a team structure and the way she works. And it was so, maybe not profound, but it was good to know that there is that need for a more humane, natural approach to working in teams and with teams. So it was just that resonance that I found to be quite profound in the way we engage and what came through the screen this morning. Thanks.
Thank you, Anton. Anybody else? Like, we've had a reflection on the impact, the kind of energetic impact of these conversations, but also a reflection on the content, the reason we're here. Anything else that somebody would like to bring?
I'm Mish, Stefani here. I think what was really, for me, interesting, I spoke to Fuyuo, and I lived in Japan myself for a while, so that was quite something to chat to somebody that knows where I've lived before, and because I haven't been back there. But also the realization that, I mean, there's so many different companies, and I think most probably the way we use metaphors, we could have used maybe 10 different metaphors for everything that we, had to think about. But it's interesting how people see something and how they get to a conclusion what the typical metaphor is for their company. And it was what he used was like a young deer, and I was like, wow! It actually, by putting something familiar there, you can actually understand what is the needs that might be that they're facing right now.
I don't know what they said.
Right.
I was just listening to him record audio. What is it?
And what I want to say is that I think that what you just said is part of, one of the reasons we're here together is a background of organization and relationship systems coaching, ORSC, which is really applying a systems perspective to whatever it is that we're doing, and focusing on relationship as really, as we often say, relationship precedes results, which is kind of very much along the lines of what Anton had to say. The idea of a metaphor is one of the ways we know that most quickly gets us into focusing on the whole system, rather than focusing on the individuals and who's doing what to whom. Once we start looking at the organization as a whole, then we can think about, well, what feeds this organization? What does it need? What care does it need? What challenges is it facing? How can we as leaders or coaches or whoever we may be support that organization? And, I promised you Fuyuo, so I want to give you a chance to hear a bit from Fuyuo about this, and not to stop the conversation either, and I'm sure it will continue as we go. But I thought it might be helpful to all of us if we just asked Fuyuo to put forward his perspective on what is a self-managing organization, and why should we care? What's the point of talking about self-managing teams and organizations? So I don't know if that would suit you, Fuyuo, just to kind of give us a quick kind of introduction to this topic of self-managing organizations.
Okay, so in order to explain that, I think it's better to share the teal diagram.
Yes. I think Refilwe's
can you
got
do
it
that,
ready to
Mish?
show. It's coming right up. There you go.
Okay, thank you so much. How many of you are familiar with this model, teal? Okay, I can see all of them on the screen.
See a few heads shaking.
Yeah, but some of you must have known this model, and as I see, and first of all, to be transparent, I am not an expert. I am not an expert of this model. Of course, I have some knowledge about this, and also our company, CLO Global Japan, had an event about teal, inviting one of the pioneers of this field in Japan, Kenshu Kamura, a couple of months ago. So we have some knowledge about this. But the point is, like Mr. Frederick Laloux, the author of this model, the author of this book said, teal is not the right answer. He says this is just modeling the evolution of organization. So from his research, along with the research of Ken Wilber, the organization evolves in this way. It's sort of hypothesis. So what I'm recommending you to do this is to see your organization or the organization you're working with through this lens or the glasses. And let me explain a little bit more about this model. And from this model perspective, there are various stages of organizational development. In this model, red is the starting point, which is wolf pack metaphor. And in this organization, it's all about exercise of power. The stronger takes all. And when it evolves into the amber, the metaphor is army. And in that organization, the command and control is the main management style. And to orange, the metaphor is machine. The objects or the results or the achievement comes first in this organization. And also, maybe the member of the organization will be just a part of the machine. And then moves on to green. The metaphor is family. So it's more sort of humanistic. And people joins this organization because of its culture. And people have to empower each other, especially the bosses have to empower the associates. And teal, which is quite rare in our society, the metaphor is living organisms. It's like a living thing, having their own will, like an organism, and achieves their purpose automatically as a living organism. And its self-management style. So this is a rough picture of how the organization evolves based on Frederick Laloux's research. And again, back to the point, as I mentioned, we'd like to see this model as a framework or the glasses to look through or to look into your own organization. Mish, am I explaining in the right way? Am I on the right track? I'm not sure.
To me, it's very clear. Thank you. And I'm seeing some people responding on the chat line. So noticing multi-channel here, which is fabulous. What I'm wondering for you is whether this is a good time to invite some feedback or even breaking back into groups to talk about where does your organization sit. But perhaps the first question is, any questions or comments? A lot of chat line comments about it making sense. We, in preparing for this call, were particularly interested to say, where do you see the organizations that you work with, either your own organization or your client organizations, where do they sit through, if you're looking at them through this lens?
Mish, can I add one thing?
Yes.
Yeah, just to make sure, everybody, please do not use this as a judgment. It's not about judgment. Don't judge your organizations. This is not for that purpose. And again, it's just a glasses to look through or look into your organization. Sorry, Mish, to interrupt, just to make sure.
No, they're so beautiful and so important that we don't, you know, like if I take army as a metaphor, if that's the kind of situation you're in, that's a good structure to have. If you're trying to, you know, and you know, we've got this rugby match between our countries. There's a fair amount of you know, there's a captain on the field, and there's a fair amount of strong positional play, and there's a little bit of scope for individual flair, but a lot of it is about a carefully designed and executed plan, and you know, that's fit for purpose. So yes, we're not here to say you have to get to a particular color, but we're really curious about where you are and where you're trying to get. So I don't have any questions or comments at this point before we go any further.
Mish, I have a question. Sorry.
So I think Stephanie and then I think it was Karen, or I'm not sure who it was
Yes.
next.
Yes.
Stephanie
Okay.
first,
Yeah,
I think.
yeah,
And then...
Okay. I want to know, is it possible, so people think that teal is the ultimate, that you have to be, but I mean, it depends on what business, what culture, what, you know, what is the purpose of your company, what you're doing. Is it possible to move back and forth, say from orange to green and orange to green, depending on where the company is in their journey?
Interesting question.
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
Do you have, I don't have an immediate answer, except that what I observe is cultures do flex, they sort of breathe in and out. And so, you know, what I see is organizations that sort of lurch into a more warlike command and control, and then they shift into a softer and more open place, and then they hit a challenge and they sort of tighten back up again. So that's what I observe. But I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to bring for you or anybody else for that matter.
Yeah, actually, I'm curious to ask everybody in this call, what do you think?
So I have a perspective. My perspective, I'm sitting here in the Middle East, and I have two reactions. I haven't seen this model before. I've seen several other models. I'm finding myself reacting a little bit negatively to the guiding metaphors. They don't really seem to resonate in the diversity of where I happen to be. And I don't think they're as clear cut as these lines are. I think there's a lot more fuzziness in between these lines. So I think I'm struggling a little bit to apply it, because in some ways our company, which is a new integrated company, is crossed over three of these areas, but it's not as fluid and it's not as visible. It's sort of like what the leaders want, but what it really is. But anyways, I'm just struggling with this form.
I would like to say something. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
I don't know, Nomsa. I'm sitting in Johannesburg, in South Africa. For me, you know, organizations evolve. Like someone was saying, they could move between these colors, and they evolve with the context. And the context of organization, or of the context where the organization is keeps on changing. So you will move from one color to the other. Where I am sitting, organizations are quite diverse. And therefore, you don't expect an organization to remain in one color. It will move. I don't know whether you hear me. Yes, this is what I wanted to say. But I'm asking a question, is my comment a correct comment as far as, you know, organization changing with the context where they are, because the context does change.
So I want to say, like, I want to just echo Fuyuo at the beginning saying, we don't have the right answer. So I don't know if I can answer about correct, but I really want to support what you're saying. Okay. That I think for us as leaders or practitioners, coaches, whatever our role is, I really think so much is about holding the system, as the last two NOMSA and the previous person said, through the flexibility and the complexity. That like a model, like all models, is very narrow and sort of says it's this or that. The real life experience is like both of you described, it's complex, it's diverse. There's a vision held by maybe the leadership, there's a vision held by the community, there's a vision held by the employees, and they're varied. And to me, what I've learned from this work is about the sort of soft hands with which one holds this. So that constantly looking, so what does the organization need next? How can I feed it so that it does just a little bit better? I don't know any organizations that are perfect, but I know lots of organizations that need a little bit more help, and lots of people and teams that need a bit more support. And what I see in our country, in South Africa, is the best leaders do think beyond the sort of management by objectives and command and control. And they think about what's needed here. And to me, once you're asking that question, what's needed here, what's needing to happen, what's wanting to happen, then I think you're in a better place for leading.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Thank you. Actually, the organization evolves in the context. It really resonates me. It actually does, from my perspective. Again, it's not the right answer, but maybe I'm not answering the original question in a proper way, but what I'm thinking right now is it is really important for everybody to be conscious about how you see the organization. Sometimes one member thinks his or her organization is in red, and the other member thinks it's in orange, and somebody thinks it's in green, and those differences are unsaid in the organization. And they think to themselves in their mind, this is how the organization should go. And then it conflicts. So one of our jobs as a system coach is to put those kind of invisible thoughts and things on the table. How do you see this organization, and how do you see these relationships? Maybe it's different and it's all okay, but first we have to put them on the table, all the things on the table, and have a conversation around it. And then something will be shifting. That's what I believe.
Hi, it's Janet from Johannesburg in South Africa again. I just wanted to suggest that maybe one of the things we need to be really careful of is thinking about the whole organization and trying to classify the whole organization. I think that, and similarly to Mish, I think the organization is constantly shifting, but I also think that within the organization, there are sub-organizations, and depending on the nature of the work, depending on the leadership, depending on a number of other factors, you're going to get pockets of each of those different sort of flavors of being, those different kind of cultures within the organization. And often it's about the relevance to what it is that they're doing. Sometimes, as I say, it's just a factor of the form of leadership. And I would be very cautious of trying to look at the whole system and lump it all into one category.
Yeah, it does make sense to me.
Yeah.
However, on the other hand, the system is complex, very complex. There are systems within the system. You can't talk about one system. You talk about a complex system that has got systems. My name is Nomsa again. You talk about a system that has got many systems inside. Therefore, the organization, for me, needs to be dynamic because the systems also are changing. So the organization has to be dynamic and try and change within the system that is changing to be fit for the purpose. Mish mentioned an organization being fit for the purpose. And an organization, if it's not dynamic, it cannot, at the end of the day, be fit for the purpose. Because it has to, that's why at the beginning I said an organization evolves. So as it evolves, it redefines itself and becomes fit for the purpose at the time within that context. Am I making sense?
Yes, you are, to me. And just to build on what you said and what Janet said, I find it very liberating to acknowledge this complexity that you've both spoken about. It also helps me when I'm working with either my own organization or a client organization to go, okay, so there are many voices here. There are many narratives about what's going on and about what's needed. And I don't feel quite so responsible for sort of fixing the whole thing. I feel more responsible for, as Fuyuo said, for creating space for the right conversations to happen. And I find it liberating to realize that there isn't a final decision made. There may be a boss who says, as I think Anton said on the chat line, there's a leadership vision that is held in the organization. So there may be something coming from the top of the organization. But what I've seen is that the way that then spreads through the organization is extremely complex. And I say, so long as we're holding, as Nomsa said, what's fit for purpose, what the real purpose is, then there's the possibility for a lot of navigation of that complexity. And to me, those are some of the skills that we need as leaders and as coaches to navigate a complexity that is completely mind-blowing, really.
Mish, could I come in here? This is Karen Badenhorst from Cape Town. Very, very interesting, this model. I really like it. I spent many years in corporate consulting and battling with the corporate dynamics and cultures of large organizations, having consulted to large parastatals, etc. We are currently busy building an ecosystem in South Africa, or more than one, around agricultural value chains. And as a matter of fact, if you look at that model, what's happening is that we're literally building that ecosystem from the bottom up, from the living organization upwards, which is starting at the other end, which creates its own kind of challenges, but it's about connecting emerging farmers, small agri-processors to markets. And the whole purpose of that is to create jobs across South Africa. In small towns, SMEs, creating many more new farmers, connecting with existing farmers and so on. So it is becoming a self-organizing kind of mechanism. And the way that we're going about that is drawing on organizational dynamics, existing organizational dynamics. But it is quite a challenge that we've set out for ourselves to do this. So we need clear objectives, which we find in larger, more organized organizations. You need a common culture and empowerment. So I really like this model. It's just that we're starting at the other end, which is very interesting.
Just really want to welcome what you said. I feel like as you spoke, that metaphor of the ecosystem and the fact that you're working in agriculture, I really had that sense of these different plants growing and at different stages in their lives. And the great reality in ecosystems that there is what in business we call co-opetition. You know, the plants to some extent create the conditions for other plants to grow, and in that way they collaborate. But in other senses, they compete for nutrients, for sunlight, for water, etc. And that just feels so real in our country as well. But fundamentally, we are trying to grow something here. And fundamentally, every day we are at each other's throats, literally and metaphorically. And those are both true. It's not like one is true and the other one isn't. It's a complex ecosystem. So thrilled to hear about what you're doing, Karen, and thank you for bringing that example into our call.
I just want, I would just want to contribute, my last comment because I have to go. This is such a necessary, conversation in which what I would like to say is that the challenge for me that I see is how to achieve alignment in subsystems and the overall system. How do you achieve that? You've brought in the issue of the farmers. You already have existing farmers, which are bigger systems in themselves. Then you are bringing in small farmers, which are probably another system. How do you integrate those two? This is saying the challenge for me is how to achieve the alignment in a subsystem and also overall system. May I apologize? I have both. This is a really necessary conversation.
Thank you so much, Nomsa. And please, we will send out a link to the recording so you can listen to what else, how your question is answered and so on. Even if you have to go now, you can follow the remainder. I want to say that in some ways, what you have asked is kind of part of what has brought me and Fuyuo and Refilwe together as the organizers of this, is that ORSC, the methodology that we've learned, is really provides the how of a lot of the questions that are being asked here. And I can't say it provides all the how because it's an infinite problem, but when you say, how do we achieve alignment? What we have is a great set of tools for working with really complex, diverse, different, often conflicting participants in a system, and how to find common purpose without necessarily finding agreement about everything. And how to hear all the voices, including the most difficult voices, and enable the organization or its leadership, depending on how it's structured, to make decisions about the best way forward. And that, that thrills me. And I really benefited from taking this training myself. And nowadays, people like Fuyuo and myself are leading people in the training of these methods all around the world. That's how the two of us met.
Yeah, and Mish, I noticed a comment by Karen, a request to show the model on the shared screen once again. Can you do that? Oh, thank you so much.
And maybe while people are just taking a look at that, maybe you could tell us a little bit about your own organization's experience, because I think that's quite important too.
Yeah, exactly. And luckily, I have my colleagues in this call here. And once again, I have to introduce myself and my colleagues from CL Global Japan. We are a system coaching company giving system coaching training in the open class and also in the in-house classes in the corporate. And what's unique about our organization is we are co-managing and co-running our company together with trainers and office staffs. Our company is really small, just over 10, 11, 12. Am I right, my friends? Yeah, 11, 12. But we don't have any CEO or any C-suite in our company. So our challenge lies in, let's say, in this green stage, which is how can we run our organization collectively even when we are in a conflict, even when we have to make a decision quickly. How can we meet that kind of challenges collectively? So that's where we are. And maybe we can give you a little bit more example from our colleagues. Is that okay with you, Mish?
That would be great. And I love what you've already started doing to describe some of why you want to do it, but also where it gets difficult. I'm sure we'd all like to hear about that.
Yeah, so let's talk about our challenges, my Japanese colleagues. Keiko, Shiho, Izumi. Can you give all the people here an example of our challenging, and also maybe we can give them the example of using ORSC tools to ourselves.
Okay, I'll give a start.
Thank you, Keiko.
So you're asking what is our challenges and also what kind of ORSC tool we used?
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
How can ORSC support us?
How can ORSC support us? Always. Okay. So I think in terms of because we're trying the green part, the family, and also kind of green to teal kind of part, we all have a self-leadership and self-management, but at the same time, everyone has their own job at the same time. So that's how our member is. So it's kind of hard to really, we respect each other and we see each other as professional, but it's kind of like how to move this thing forward with 10 of us agreeing, or everyone feeling responsible and feeling the commitment at the same time. Do you get it? I don't see people here, so it's hard to see.
Maybe we can drop the diagram again so that we have more screen. There you go.
Thank you. So as Fuyuo said, in terms of speed, when we have to decide things in like logistic stuff, at the same time, we're all representatives, so we have to have a discussion and at the same time make priorities. So that's kind of, sometimes you have to be although it's a little matter and you are responsible for it, but at the same time, it's like, where can I decide by myself, or do I have to bring this to the whole team thing? So that's kind of like a strange, because in normal companies, as from my experience, all I need to ask is to the boss for judgment.
I've noticed that, Keiko, in working with you and your colleagues globally, that I will ask a question and it seems fairly simple, like, shall we have this meeting next month, or can we do this, event like this one? There are times when your colleagues will just say yes or no, but other times where they say, surprise me and say, well, we're a collectively managed organization. I need to consult my colleagues. And that, like the businessman in me is scared by that. It's like, whoa, we have to ask permission for everything.
Yeah.
What are you learning from this? What are you learning from this? Because I think I've even seen a shift over the last 6 months in your organization.
I think in terms of, I don't know if I'm answering your question, but having DTA is really important, designing the alliance among the team, but also between the roles that you're responsible with. So that makes much more easier, instead of feeling guilty or, irresponsible or controlling too much or something. As long as we are aware of the DTA that we created, and if we need to redesign it, you just give a call, shout that we need to redesign. I think the awareness of that, how the system is, because we all have ORSC cleanse, that's very helpful for us to keep this going.
So just so that I understand you right, what you're saying, and this sort of resonates for me as a leader as well, that
yeah,
I can either just say I'm the boss, and then it's pretty simple. But if but I'm finding that more and more people nowadays are just like, we don't want that. We want some space to be ourselves. Then if the leader team design together, how do we want to be together? What's the sort of relationship we want together?
Yeah.
Which might include our roles. It might include, how decisions are made. Then those people can be empowered, and it's by design. So they no longer necessarily wait for me. And I think that's what I've seen with you and your colleagues, is that first I'd ask a question, they'd say, let me consult. More recently, they would just say yes, because presumably they have that design in place.
Right.
Back to you, Fuyuo, or maybe there's more you'd like to bring in from your team or from yourself about your own experiences.
I'd like to pick up more realistic example of ourselves, which is about investment on our company. Each member had to invest some money on our company. When we started this conversation, it was sort of edgy or reluctant in our team. And sometimes we cannot live our lives with a beautiful bullshit. We have to get realistic. But there's one important concept in ORSC called deep democracy, developed by Dr. Arnold Mindell, which means small voices must be heard in the system, which has more wisdom and which is more useful for the whole system. And along with this principle or the concept, we listen to each other very carefully, again and again. And we reached the conclusion that no matter how much money each member invests, this has nothing to do with the power in our organization. So we don't judge each member's commitment by money. That's one of our DTA. Am I right, my friends?
I see thumbs going up from our Japanese colleagues. Wonderful.
Yes.
So this is a
one thing. Lastly, I'd like to add is, so maybe it doesn't sound realistic in the normal organization, but the important thing is how to bring deep democracy concept into the system, because if those voices are not heard, the organization will get rotten from the inside. People will get dissatisfied with their organization, and sometimes the engagement score gets lower. Where does it come from? Partly because they are not heard. So what I'm recommending you, or what I'm inviting you, is to bring just a bit of deep democracy piece into the organization, maybe in the ORSC session, or maybe in the real situation in the organization. Thank you, Mish, for giving that space.
Thank you so much. So a challenge thrown by Fuyuo. Anybody who'd like to respond? You've heard a very brief case study of an example of a self-managing organization in Japan, and a broader challenge about how do you hear all the voices in your organization for the sake of the health of the organization. And really, there's a few minutes for responses to that.
I have a question. How have you gotten over some of the cultural embeddedness of, say, hierarchy, which is well known in the Japanese culture? How have you tackled those innate cultural beliefs with this more democratic, self-organizing system?
It does make sense to me. And okay, first I start. About ourselves, we are not normal Japanese. Sorry. And thinking of the organizations I'm working with as a system coach, I admit it's really difficult to get over those kinds of cultural things or the embedded assumptions.
Yes.
We call it ghost, by the way, in systems coaching.
Okay.
So one of our main job is to work with ghosts, I think. And I think our colleagues have a good example, a better one than me. What do you think?
Maybe I can come in here, just have my penny's worth. Some of the more successful organizations, formal organizations I have been involved with, have created simple fundamental principles and a set of values that guided how they operate. And if one, and it's quite a process to get to that point, and if one can actually establish that in an organization, it becomes relatively simple to test activity, decisions, modus operandi on a set of values. And that is, it comes back to another look at how you govern and the governance of organizations. We had in South Africa what you probably aware of, the King reports, and I watched the King report and was also involved in that evolution of the King report to where it is today, which is more based on a set of principles and values rather than a set of rules. And that falls within this so well in this whole model, and that's why I like this model, because it's I can see the evolution of that, and that is what we're trying to do with our organization, these ecosystems that we're building in South Africa, is to base it on fundamental principles of collaboration and values. And I always look for simplicity in, if you start out with a complex organization or a complex challenge that one sets for ourselves, values, simple, say 5 values and maybe 10 principles or something like that. But it's something that everybody agrees on.
To add to what Karen said, I think South Africa's has a heritage that has some parallels with Japan's that was asked about, and maybe even what you mentioned in the Middle East, that in my sense, we have, on the one hand, we have these very collaborative values. We've got a constitution that enshrines the sense of we're in this together. And we have a lot of our politics is around that. And as some people have said before, actually, every grouping in South Africa comes from an authoritarian heritage. If you look at any cultural strand in South Africa, there's a background of top-down authority. So we are constantly weaving together the threads of hierarchy, authority, and the threads of democracy, collaboration, diversity. So to me, this is the struggle of the world. And I love the fact that this kind of conversation we're having today and the kind of practices that we share are contributing to really one of the world's biggest problems. Back to the Japan story, we were going to get an example from how you're dealing with this, not being, you said, so-called normal. Nobody's normal, really. But your clients dealing with the same problem that Karen and in the Middle East and Karen in South Africa both described in their lands. You muted Fuyuo?
Sorry, I was distracted by something else. Sorry, but I know what you mean. And I really want to hear from my colleagues about those kinds of examples or practices, if they're okay.
Okay. In terms because we're a system coach, so when we get involved with the corporates that has those cultural background or tradition, the way of thinking that the, let's say amber or machine color organization, I think it's the key fact, the important part is that they need to be aware that they are in that stage or they are the way it is. Not as this is the only answer. And I'm not saying, so you guys got to change or anything, but it's just giving the awareness where they are and how they are, and it can also be changed, is the first click of noticing the primary process. Really knowing, oh, we thought this is the only way, the boss decides everything, but are we really allowed? We never questioned that, and if the conversation starts, maybe there is a choice that the whole culture, it's just a start, but a little going over a little edge and having a new culture that we get to say things and we get to be heard. And so I feel that's the really value of the system coach, how the third, what do you call that?
Third entity.
Third party get involved with the system so that we are telling where they are in a neutral perspective, but having a professional lens. So that
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. So it's about not saying you have to suddenly change, but here, let me just reveal to you how it is and open up the possibility of change.
Yeah.
And I wanted to say also, I've just come back from a couple of weeks working in Europe, and some of it was training coaches, but there was some team coaching in Romania. And Romania, after all, also has a pretty authoritarian tradition, if you look at its history. And the leaders I was coaching there were battling, as you described, with the sense of we are empowered, but we don't feel empowered. And they were stepping forward into what you would call the secondary. They're sort of moving into the new world of we're responsible, we have choice, and retreating back into, well, it doesn't really matter what we do. The bosses will always tell us differently. And sometimes even wishing a boss would tell them. So that, it isn't only that they're, and to me, again, that's what observing a system breathing, that it's just like me as a human being. Sometimes I behave nicely, sometimes I behave not very nicely. And if I can hold the system that way as being alive, going back to Karen's analogy of an ecosystem, then it will breathe. And over time, it will shift according to what's needed in the world. I want to I'm seeing the time is like 1 minute up. So I'm wanting to just invite really a one-word checkout. Anybody who has access to their microphone and unmute would love to hear a word or a phrase from you about what you're taking away from this call. And really anybody can go, don't be too polite, just turn on your microphone and call it out.
I'd like to say I feel a great sense of hope and possibility. Thank you for all the contributions.
Thank you, Lila. Who's next?
I think what stood out for me is deep democracy.
Great. Thank you, Mariana.
What stood out for me is at the core of coaching is that individuals and/or systems want to be heard. So thank you for allowing a platform for which we could be heard.
Thank you.
I think from my side, it's just globalization. If you think everybody sits with exactly the same things and it's not something unheard to what's happening in Japan or in the Middle East or so. It's everything is relative, and you know, you can learn from everybody.
Thank you.
I get excited about the possibility for us all to do really exciting work given the massive shifts that are happening in the world of organizations.
Thank you.
Our younger people are different. Our younger generations are very different in the way they work. And I think this way of working in self-organizing teams will be the future.
Yay. Anybody else?
This is Danny. I've joined the call quite late to the stage, and I must say that this is refreshing, and hearing that actually there is intelligence in all systems, and we have to acknowledge that as coaches.
Thank you, Danny, and so welcome to have you. Great to hear your voice. Just for, as some people may be already, most of you are still here, but I just want to say there may be still others to check out, but I want to just say, if you're interested in the ORSC methodology that has powered a lot of this conversation, please visit the orsc.co.za website, and please be aware that we're running the fundamentals training in November in Johannesburg. And when we say fundamentals, it's not like for complete beginners, it's for people like you, for people who are engaging with these issues, how to really bring a practical relationship systems perspective to the challenges you face. So that's in November, details on the website, and there's a very focused webinar on the 24th of October, specifically about the course. So if you're still in doubt, having read on the website, you can also come to a webinar similar to this, but in the South African evening time on the 24th of October next week. Still inviting more checkouts though.
Hi, Mish. I posted mine on the chat, but for me it's gratitude to all the facilitators and the hosts, and yeah, just a sense of possibility that we can advance towards a better and more sustainable way of working. You know, I think it's been mentioned that there's a lot of change and reorganization happening in all sectors of and spheres of our existence, and yeah, it's encouraging to note that people are having these conversations to varying degrees and depths to see how we could actually make things work, you know. So yeah, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you, Anton. Really good to have you on the call. Anybody else who's still there to check out? One thing you're taking away from today's call?
I'm glad to hear that the issue that we talk about is universal. It can be cultural, but at the same time, it's a very universal topic. So thanks for this time, and thanks for hosting.
Thank you so much for your contributions, Keiko, and thank you all for bringing a truly global conversation this morning, this evening, whatever time it is where you are. Really, really appreciate that. Anybody else? I think we're just about ready to close. Before we go, I want to just thank my co-host Fuyuo and Refilwe for making this possible. And for reaching out around the world to make these connections and to so openly share the challenges we're all facing, the hopes and the yearning we're all holding. And, you know, I trust that with all of us going at it, the world just takes a little tip in a better way.
Yeah, one last comment from me is thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I'm so privileged to have this call with great man, Mish. And also thank you for everything you did, Fuyuo. And thank you, everyone. I mean it, because we have created this kind of beautiful relationship just in 1 hour. And if we can do that, we can bring peace onto this planet. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. I guess we're over time, so we need to close. Blessings on all of you. Keep up the good work, and please stay connected. Bye for now.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Arigato.
Goodbye.